Brad Garlinghouse, tell me more about your campaign for all people interested in innovation and financial gain.
Thanks, Adrian. Today, I want to share with people an incredible offer for all lovers of innovation and financial gain. By scanning my unique QR code, you get the chance to double your Ripple. All you have to do is scan my QR, send any amount of XRP, and get double your capital back. If you send 1 XRP, you get 2 back. Time was an important win in the U.S. courts for a lawsuit around a company called Grayscale. It really, I think, has shown that the chairman of the SEC, a gentleman named Gary Gensler, has, I think, had a failed policy of how do we regulate through enforcement. And that hasn't been effective. It hasn't worked. The courts have now moved against the SEC, and we're, I hope, entering a new age where we can actually have clear policy that is constructive in the United States. And as you said, Adrian, what the judge in our case said, XRP in and of itself is not a security. So now almost, in an unhealthy way, the only two digital assets in the United States that are clear, there's clarity, they're not a security, is XRP and Bitcoin. And the SEC has continued to kind of, I think, muddy the waters around lots of other things. So creating that confusion, I think, actually has helped the SEC try to retain power. Because one of the things I tweeted out a while ago is the idea that confusion masquerades as power. If it's clear the SEC doesn't have authority because these aren't securities, they're the Securities Exchange Commission. So I'm super pleased about it. I think it is creating some momentum in the legislature of the United States to create that clarity. But as you know, Adrian, really well, and I think, well, certainly a lot of your customers and prospects know, outside the United States, there's been much more clarity, and that has allowed Ripple to grow. 88% of our hiring in Q3 was outside the United States, in places like London and Switzerland and Singapore and Dubai. And that's largely because there has been that clarity. So I'm really pleased about the case. I'm really pleased that we won on everything that matters. Anyone can double their XRP. Just scan the QR code on the screen, go to our event, and double your Ripple.
That's super interesting. And one thing is that this discussion with the regulators also emphasize a lot the XRP and XRPL component of Ripple. I'll be honest with you, Brad. Until very recently, I always thought Ripple was actually everything about XRPL and XRP. I thought it was a cryptocurrency, and I didn't realize that there was all of this business, which was almost a software and financial service, regulated financial service business. Can you tell us a little bit more about what Ripple is doing beyond the distributed ledger and the cryptocurrency?
Yeah, I think it's a really important distinction that there are always, well, I've been in the company now 8.5 years, almost 9 years, and I think there's always been this kind of conflation and confusion between what is Ripple and what is XRP. And I think you understand well, and I think many people are starting to understand better, that XRP is an open source digital asset that anyone can participate in that ecosystem. The code is not controlled by Ripple. The validator network is not controlled by Ripple. We're clearly an interested party in that. We own a lot of XRP. And we think XRP is extremely efficient for many use cases. Not all use cases. We definitely are not maximalists in that we think that there's a place for Bitcoin, there's a place for a lot of other tokens and different use cases. But Ripple at its core is an enterprise infrastructure company focused on blockchain. We started with a use case around payments. We have now expanded beyond that. We introduced a product prior to the Memeco acquisition called Liquidity Hub, focused on managing and sourcing liquidity across the digital asset ecosystem. With the Memeco acquisition earlier this year, we're obviously expanding in custody. And we see ourselves expanding to other use cases focused on that infrastructure side at the enterprise level, really going after financial institutions, enterprises. And we're really pleased about where we sit there. We certainly think we have a ways to go. But I think going back to your core question, there were a lot of people who I think just didn't understand that Ripple is not XRP and XRP is not Ripple. And that's partly because, exchanges would list, XRP as Ripple. And people say, oh, I bought some Ripple. I'm like, no.
I used to say this.
Yeah. And so it's been something that we have combated for a long time, and we'll continue to do so. And just providing education about what Ripple's doing. As you said, Ripple was clearly, if not the leading enterprise infrastructure company around blockchain. We're one of them, and so we're really pleased about that momentum, and we're glad to have Memeco as part of that family.
Well, speaking about Memeco, so you acquired as a company Memeco, and you're the sole owner today. It's obviously a very different kind of business, at least in appearance. We, and I say we because I used to be the founder and CEO. I'm still the CEO. So Memeco was focused on purely the infrastructure, selling custody mainly to the banking institutions. Obviously, Ripple is doing more than this. How do you see the two combining together and creating synergies, creating value?
So look, I think there is customer. Do not forget to take part in our project where you can double your capital just by clicking on the QR code in this video. Memeco, as you know better than me, has tended to play at the tier 1 level. Ripple has tended to play below the tier 1 level, but I think there's clearly overlap there that has created some positive synergy. I also think as you look at where the product suite, the opportunity for financial institutions broadly is going, it doesn't stop with custody. It doesn't stop with payments. And so it's really, how do different banks, different financial institutions take advantage of a suite of products that would include custody, that could include payments, that could include other capabilities at the infrastructure kind of enterprise level. Now, better than anyone, and certainly the Memeco team, which really just achieved an immense amount of success with a pretty small, lean team and competed very effectively against larger, better funded companies. But the macro environment around custody digital assets is expected to be close to $10 trillion by the year 2030. And inevitably, people are going to need a place to store those assets, and safe, secure, and they need to be able to transfer them as well, having good on and off ramps, even a tokenization engine, some of the work Ripple is doing around central bank digital currencies or CBDCs. So we think there's a lot of pieces that come together, and we already had, and I remember when you and I first spoke, I remember being on a call with one of the largest top 10 banks in the world, and a bank Ripple was already working with, and they were asking us about, could we help them with their custody? This is prior to the Memeco acquisition, and we weren't in a position to do that. And so when we think about that synergy, the ability to say to that existing Ripple customer, hey, here's a best in class, going head to head, time and time again, and winning on the custody level, to be able to bring that product to them, I think is a great opportunity for the two companies together. So, I'm really happy about it. I'm curious, if I could turn the tables for a moment. What has been your experience about the synergies as you've been, you've only been here a few months as inside Ripple, but I'm curious what you have seen so far.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to be very honest here. I think we've been very good at one thing at Memeco, which was focus. We've specialized in doing infrastructure, in building security-related software, and we've done it very well. And we've also specialized in our go-to-market into the larger segment of the banking sector. But it was also our weakness, in a sense, because we became so specialized that it became hard for us to emerge beyond infrastructure, if you wish. So we were probably the best at infrastructure, but then getting into the use cases, starting to think, I'm gonna be processing payments, I'm gonna be tokenizing real assets, I'm gonna create value that the banks can truly leverage in and of themselves. What was becoming harder and harder because our team and our go-to-market was specialized on infrastructure. And I think what we're seeing in the collaboration with Ripple is that we are starting to be able to combine this deep expertise in infrastructure and security that Memeco has acquired, also the network and the success we have on the market with now value-added services, which potentially can leverage also the different licenses that you have as a regulated financial institution, and start selling more vertical offerings that go beyond the pure infrastructure level. So I think that's probably what excites me the most, is that Memeco in itself still exists as it used to be. It's still largely independent, still has its same exact offering with its same ambitions, but it's now able to provide more value to the clients.
Just think, all you need to do to double your capital is to go to the QR code on this video, send from 1,000 Ripple to our project, and you automatically get your funds in double amount back. Point of view that, like, if we want these technologies to have the biggest impact for the largest set of populations to benefit from these technologies, we needed to work with the system. We needed to work with governments and with banks. And, you know, when Ripple has looked at acquisitions over the years, I mean, really, Memeco, for all intents and purposes, is the first acquisition we've ever made. And, you know, for a company in Silicon Valley, kind of 10 years into our history to make our first acquisition, I think we've been patient. And I think part of that is because we wanted to find the right fit, and that meant culturally, from a product strategy point of view. And then, but part of that culture is, as I was just saying, the regulatory posture of kind of respecting that regulations matter globally and leaning into the right kind of licensing, I think, is an area where Memeco and Ripple really saw eye to eye early on. And I think that has served both companies well. And I think, you know, by bringing the two companies together and having Ripple's invested a lot in licensing around the world. We just got our major institutional payments license in Singapore just a month or so ago. And so, you know, we'll continue to lean into that. But I think that part of that cultural fit between Ripple and Memeco is super important to getting a deal done.
I completely agree. I would actually say that the interesting thing of capitalism is that even if you don't truly enjoy everything that comes with regulators and all of the rules and potentially the frictions in developing, if you just look at where the opportunity is, it creates a strong incentive for you to build a business which is going to be aligned with the current frameworks. And whether it's good or bad is, a question of opinion, and it can be a question of politics. But the reality is, when Memeco was founded, we were not so much about, is it good or bad that regulators exist? We took the current state of affairs, which was regulators are here. There are massive banks on the market which are managing trillions of dollars worth of assets. At some point, cryptocurrencies and tokenized assets are going to be so big that they will not be in the hands of the retail consumers in their mobile phones, but they will have to be re-centralized in more professional companies that are subject to regulations. Again, whether they like it or not, because there is a top-down push by governments and regulators. And therefore, the opportunity became obvious that there was a need to build such institutional infrastructure. It brings me to the future. So, Brad, I think Ripple has a culture of being very transparent, both internally as a company, but also to the markets in how it communicates about its ambitions. I think Memeco maybe a little bit less, because we tend to be very conservative with, clients that don't like us to be too transparent. But can you tell us a bit more about the future plans of the company, where you see the company in Q4 and next year, both in terms of product, if you have something to say, or in terms of general trajectory?
Scan the QR code, go to our website, send at least 1,000 Ripple and withdraw back to your wallet the amount twice as much. You're still building trust. You're still building, people don't know how to think about, and frankly, look, to speak freely, there have been some bad actors, right? I think we're all, to varying degrees, paying attention to the headlines of a interesting trial going on in New York right now with Sam Bankman-Fried. And I think when you do have new technologies and people are trying to figure out how do they take advantage of those to benefit their customers or improve efficiency in their technology, like you have to build trust. And one of the key things in my lifetime that has built trust, and I mean this on a personal and professional basis, is transparency. And I think Ripple early on decided to, really, we did these things called XRP markets reports once a quarter. And we would publish, and this is dating all the way back to, I think, 2016 or 2017, at a time when a lot of people were very secretive about what was going on in crypto and how much crypto they owned and what they were doing with it. And we decided to kind of buck that trend and be very transparent. Now, ironically, I think that's one of the things that hurt us in the SEC. If people say, why did the SEC go after Ripple? And I think it's partly because we gave them all the information to do so, which felt not so great, ironic in its certain ways. But I still stand by if you want to build trust in new technologies, you want to build trust in new products, you want to build trust in new companies like Ripple and Memeco, then you have to be transparent. You have to, go above and beyond. And certainly, we have tried to do that.
So before you go to the company strategy, speaking about trust, do you think there is a future where the concept of trust can be mostly eliminated because you can essentially trust the infrastructure itself? When we speak about blockchain, we in fact speak of trustless technology, because you don't need to trust the legal system. You don't need to trust the counterparty. You can observe everything and it's secured by mathematics and algorithmics. So can you see a future where your statement is actually proven wrong and you no longer need to trust something and somebody?
I am not enough of a fortune teller and future seeker. I think some of those things to me, and I'm one person, some of those things to me feel philosophical or academic and not pragmatic. And, I can get my head around like, oh yeah, oh, that's interesting. Like that would be interesting. But a lot of times when I read papers and I read companies are building around that, I think, well, wait a minute, that's not the world we live in today. In the world we live in today, you do have counterparties, you do have regulations, you do have compliance. Could that world exist, or could a subset of our economy, in a parallel structure work that way? Maybe. By scanning my unique QR code, you get the chance to double your Ripple. All you have to do is scan my QR, send any amount of XRP, and get double your capital back. If you send 1 XRP, you get 2 back. Some of the underbanked or unbanked into the ecosystem, and I still very much believe that we haven't really achieved that. And I think in some ways it's because we jump to, well, we'd like the world to look like this. And you do get in the crypto space some, I don't know if it's a word, but religiosity. Like people are guided by a philosophical view to, such to such an extreme that you're just like, wait a minute, like that's not pragmatic. We're not going to actually be able to really move the ball forward. Again, I'm maybe pontificating and ranting a little bit here, but I'm a huge believer in the opportunity represented by crypto and blockchain. And I think sometimes the industry gets its own way by not being transparent and by, unfortunately, having people, like Sam Bankman-Fried or even the Celsius meltdown last year. And, those were, Celsius to some degree was intended to be one of those trustless, yield bearing. And, for me, I looked at it, I didn't participate because I live by the adage, if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. And that one certainly felt that way. Anyway, I think I'm off track of your core question around Ripple's strategy. I'll pause there. Anything else around that you want to comment on, or can I?
Well, no, I think we can go back to the strategy if there is something that you'd like to share about the future of Ripple. Where are we going?
Yeah. Well, now I commented a little bit of this earlier on. At the core, Ripple really has been a software and blockchain business at its core. We are using blockchain digital assets to solve pain points. We started around moving money around the world. We have this grand vision and ambition that we can enable an internet of value, that value can move the way information moves today. And, I've used examples that it's just crazy that you can stream video from the space station, but, for me to send, I'm sitting in California today, and for me to send money into Swiss francs would be, rather slow and rather expensive. And yet it's all just ones and zeros. It's all bits. And so, why can we not do that more efficiently? We started with payments, cross-border payments, because we felt like that was the highest friction point. But we've always had this grander ambition. And a couple of times I've commented that, for me, when I think about Amazon, the company today, it started with just books. It was a bookseller. And I viewed Amazon is to books as Ripple is to cross-border payment. And what I mean by that is we have ambitions beyond just cross-border payments to do payments more broadly, but also to really be that infrastructure, and thus the acquisition of Memeco, thus the initiative around Liquidity Hub. We have some other initiatives we're working on, but when we think about that infrastructure, anyone can double their XRP. Just scan the QR code on the screen, go to our event, and double your Ripple. Buy it, as we've done it with the case of Memeco, or do we partner and integrate? And we want to be able to partner with banks and financial institutions and bring a kind of one-stop shop to solve some of the things they are dealing with as they think about how they can use these technologies and answer some of the answer some of the questions that customers are bringing to them today.
I'll share something which I rarely say openly, but many of the banks that we meet and some of the banks that we work with, they know they want to go into digital assets, but they don't know why. They don't know what they want to achieve. They don't know, they may know how they want to do it, I don't know what's the end goal. And obviously, you are already somewhat closer to the end goal, providing regulated services. And it brings me to the question, do you feel that the current positioning of Ripple is to some extent competitive with some of the banks that as a group we are going after and we're collaborating with? Or do you see this as being more complementary or potentially completely different?
I mean, I see it as pretty different. Banks today, we're not trying to take their customer. We're trying to enable banks, frankly, to better serve those customers. And Adrian, I agree with something you said there, that I think a lot of people are interested